everyone. So, if this is your first time on my channel, welcome. My name is l.msko, and on this channel, I am going to talk about all things to improve your quality of life, whether it is personally, professionally, or academically. So, the title of today's video is Why I Avoid Being in Friend Groups. Yes, you heard that correctly. So, just to kind of structure the video, the first section will focus on five main reasons why I generally tend to avoid being in friend groups, and then the second half of this video will focus on what avoiding in friend groups has allowed me to do, or the benefits of this in my life, right? And a quick disclaimer, by no means am I telling you to avoid friend groups and that this is something you should do. This is just a video that I'm making to really talk about my personal experience, so you can take that with a grain of salt. So the first reason as to why I generally like to avoid being in friend groups is because I noticed that it causes you to, when you're in a friend group, it causes you to suppress your interest and individuality so as not to upset the group morale or the group energy. So in my personal experience, I noticed that like from my early teens to my early 20s and even sometimes today, right? When I find myself in friend groups, I can't really express my individuality or my interests because it could rub people the wrong way. And so I noticed that for me, I always had to kind of like tailor my personality to make sure it matches the group morale and energy so as not to upset the group dynamic. And doing so can be very exhausting and it can cause you to not really be authentic, right? Because you find yourself surrounded by people, but these people don't want to really see the real true version of yourself. So is it worth being in a friend group for if you have to suppress your interest? I would leave that question up for interpretation. So the second reason why I generally like to avoid being in friend groups is because when you give a private information to somebody in the friend group, they can indirectly pass that information to somebody else in the group, and that person that knows your private information or the recipient of that private information may not be somebody that you're close to, right? So yeah, like you're just like the private information that you gave to one person indirectly ends up being passed on to somebody else, and that can be very off-putting. And even if the person that gave that information to somebody else didn't do it out of malicious intent, and they maybe it slipped in their conversation with somebody else, at the end of the day the private information is still out there. And sometimes it can even be to your detriment because the person that you don't really know that knows your information, you're not really close to, but they know something private about you that you don't know they know. So it creates this weird dynamic that is very exhausting. And so the third reason why I like to avoid being in friend groups is because when you're in a friend group, sometimes you may be forced to pick a side when the group is divided due to a conflict. So I will give an example based on a personal experience I had. So in my early 20s, when I was an undergrad in uni, I was in a group of friends, and because of a conflict, it divided the group. And the two people that were clashing in the group were friends of mine, and I kind of had to take this mediator role because, like I said, I was friends with them both, but they were arguing over things that were trivial and things that were just so. It just caused so much drama in the group that didn't need to be there. And this was during the period of the global pandemic when things were on lockdown globally, and because of this, right, like I said, it just created so much drama, and it's to the point where it affected my mood and my mental health. And mind you, I'm not somebody, well, at the time I wasn't somebody that was really that good with interpersonal relationships. I thought I was, but not so much, because like I said, when you're caught in the middle of it all in the friend group of friends or friend group, you want your friends to be happy. You don't want them to be upset, and you want to make sure that people are reconciled. But doing so can be to your detriment, because even if you're trying to bring peace, you end up being sucked into the drama even more, right? Because the people that are in conflict, they don't want to reconcile, and you're just adding more fuel to the fire. So I remember, for example, let's say I would be studying for an exam, one of those friends would call me talking about the other friend and how they can't believe, the other friend would do something to them. And then I always had to kind of like keep a neutral tone because I was still friends with the other friend. So it was just so exhausting. That's like the conclusion of the story. Like it was just so exhausting because even if you tried to mediate the situation, you just get sucked into the drama, and I had to distance myself from it all because it got to a point where it was just overwhelming. So the fourth reason why I avoid or I like to avoid being in friend groups is because of gossiping. So mind you, this isn't like something that I always have come across when I have been in friend groups. It's just like for the most part, when I was in friend groups, I noticed that gossiping was prevalent, and I don't really like to talk about people because you never know what people go through. You never know what their personal struggles are. So when you're gossiping, even if it could just be something as little as, oh, I went to school today and this person did this and I really didn't like her tone. I really didn't like how she spoke to me. At the end of the day, like even if you're renting to a friend, it low key it's gossiping. You can just simply pull that person that you don't really like to the side and say, hey, I don't like when you did this. But when you're making it into a whole group matter, right? And people that are not close to that person that you're talking about end up seeing that person in a negative light. So that's the danger about gossiping. Like people that don't even know the person you're talking about end up having a negative view about that person because of something that you told them um out of your anger, which can dissipate in a couple of days when you cool down. So I just think that like when friend groups really enable you, I'm not saying this is in like it always happens, but sometimes like being in friend groups enables you to gossip, and I just don't like that. So I tend to really take my distance from that. So the fifth reason why I avoid being in friend groups is because sometimes you can feel excluded, right, in the friend group, right? Let's say two people in the group or five people are close and you're there, but they don't really invite you to outings. They do things on their own. They don't really include you. It can sometimes feel isolating, and it can sometimes feel like even if you're in a friend group, you're still alone at the end of the day, right? And I have experienced that a lot, especially during the pandemic. When I was in the friend group that I mentioned earlier in my example, sometimes because maybe two of those friends or three of those friends were from the same ethnic background, they had the same values, it was more likely they were more likely to meet up and do kind of like events together. And then sometimes I would be excluded, but mind you, it wasn't done out of malicious intent. Generally, I do believe that sometimes people plan events at the last minute, and at the time I wasn't really a somebody that liked to go out. So and the feeling of feeling isolated still kicks in when you see on social media that three of those friends went and they didn't even invite you. It can still be painful. So those are the five main reasons why I generally avoid being in friend groups. And so what avoiding being in friend groups has done for my life personally as an introvert is that it has allowed me to really tap into my deepest thoughts and journal them, write about them, and know what my self interests are, know who I am, what are my boundaries, right? And it has caused me to develop self love so much because when I was in friend groups, I, at the time, I would erase my needs to, like I said, match to make the group feel comfortable, but it has been to my detriment. And avoiding friend groups has allowed me to really tap into my self-interest, my hobbies, um, pursue my passions, and really self-improve so much and have better opportunities that I don't think I would have had if I was still in those friend groups that I had earlier. And yeah, it's this is just something that I noticed. And also, when I kind of avoided being in friend groups, it has really deepened my relationship with God so much more. This is something that I noticed for myself. So thank you for sticking towards the end. If you made it towards the end, I applaud you. Thank you. And I will see you on the next video. Bye.